Welcome to the space between two lines. I'm Alex Saunders, and this is a space for real, honest conversations about fertility, pregnancy loss, and the journey to parenthood. Here, we hear the stories of people navigating the highs, the lows, and everything in between. A place to feel seen, understood, and less alone. Because every story matters, and so does yours. Today's guest is Esther, and her story is one of loss, resilience, and navigating a fertility journey filled with challenges. She's faced PCOS, silent endometriosis, endometrial hyperplasia, 3 pregnancy losses, and 2 failed embryo transfers, all while moving through the public fertility system. In this episode, Esther shares the reality of what it means to keep going through heartbreak, uncertainty, and the hope of trying again. Welcome to the podcast, Esther. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I know that you've had quite a long journey with your fertility, so we'll jump straight in. But did you want to start by introducing yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about what your life looks like at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 37. I've been with my partner for 6 years, and we started our trying to conceive journey over 2 years ago now. So yeah, it's been a bit of a long journey, and we're still in the thick of it at the moment. So hopefully we can see the end of the road soon.
Yeah, for sure. Did you want to take me back to the beginning of your conception journey and when you and your partner first decided that you wanted to have a baby, and I guess what your conception was about fertility and your own fertility at that time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I don't drink and never have drank, never taken drugs, anything. So I always thought I was super healthy. And so when we were ready to try, I was like, oh, yeah, I'll fall pregnant instantly. And that obviously wasn't the case. But prior to that as well, I was on a drug called methotrexate. I'm sure people in the community might have heard of, usually used for miscarriages. So I had severe eczema, and that's why I was on methotrexate. So I came off that drug at least 6 to 12 months prior trying to conceive, knowing that we wanted to have a baby. And I was also on the pill since I was like 16. And so while coming off methotrexate and coming off the pill, I knew there was going to take probably 6 to 12 months for everything to regulate in my body. So I was told that expect your periods to come back normally within 6 to 12 months. And I was like, okay, not a problem. We'll just try during this time. And yeah, I noticed my periods were very, very irregular. So it was very hard to track ovulation. And that's when I decided to go see a doctor. So I had my first initial appointment with a GP. She read some blood tests and everything came back okay. And she actually even referred me to the hospital because of the methotrexate use. So she was like, let's just send you through to see a specialist just to make sure that the methotrexate is completely out of your system. And then, because it was through the public hospital, it was about a 4-month wait. So we just kept trying and nothing was happening. So unfortunately, I went and saw another GP because my current GP at the time decided to leave. So I don't know where she went. So I went to another GP and she was like, let's do an ultrasound this time. And I was like, okay, sure. And in that ultrasound, the tech was asking me a lot of questions. And then it kind of sounded like there was a lot of follicles he could see. And that's when a red flag, I was like, oh, okay, something's not quite right. And then obviously straight onto Google and it was showing results saying that it could be PCOS. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I would have had no idea. And obviously the pill would have completely had masked all this. And with one of the blood tests I did was the AMH test, and that came back at 72 or 75. It was super high. So that with the ultrasound and the blood test, the doctor was like, you've got PCOS. And that was a complete shock to me. I think I was about to turn 36 at the time. So being diagnosed with PCOS at the age of 36, I was like, wow, totally unexpected. That's just the very, very beginning of it. And then so we just kept trying. And I finally saw that specialist at the hospital, and she referred me to the reproductive services units at the women's. And I had that appointment, and there's just a lot more testing to be done. And actually, not long after, I fell pregnant. And I was like, great, we actually don't need any fertility treatment. And so I thought, but unfortunately, that ended in a loss, a very early loss. And after experiencing that loss, I actually realized I had another loss earlier in the year. But because I wasn't testing religiously, I wasn't aware that I had a loss early in the year, but I had these really, really painful cramps. And like the bleeding was super heavy. And I was like, oh my God, what happened a few months earlier? That must have been like a chemical pregnancy as well. So when I was grieving that pregnancy, I was actually grieving two losses. So that was a huge shock to me.
Yeah, for sure. So how far into your conception journey are you at this point?
We're over 2 years.
Over 2 years. How did you process that in that moment? Obviously, you're going through a pregnancy loss, but then that realization that you'd had one before, like how did you process those emotions at that time?
So at first, I was just like, I didn't realize. So I think my emotions were like, oh, I'm just processing the one. It wasn't maybe even like the next day or two when I was like, hey, this happened like a few months ago. And then it just really hit me going, oh, I've had two. I was actually quite numb after learning that, even though we didn't test, but I just knew that it was definitely a loss as well.
Yeah, awful. So, were you in the public system? You said you got a referral to the hospital. So, for this fertility treatment, is this all via the public system?
Correct. Yes.
And was there long wait times to get in to see the fertility specialist because it was through the public system?
For me, it wasn't too long because I think what happened was because when my GP referred me to a specialist within the hospital, so I was already a patient in the hospital and they referred me to the reproductive service unit. And I think that wait was about 6 weeks. So it wasn't overly long for me to get into the public system, but the appointments in between take about 3 months, which is a long wait.
Yeah. And is this all free, like it's covered by through Medicare, or do you still have to pay something to see the specialist?
No, it is completely free. So, very grateful for being in Victoria because we get 2 rounds of IVF for free. So, essentially, you can do 2 egg retrievals, and however many embryos you create is how many transfers you're eligible for.
Yeah. And do you need to have some sort of medical history to be able to use the public system, or can you just obviously if like other than a fertility issue, do you have to have any other kind of medical condition to be able to go through the public system?
Not at all. So, as long as you meet the criteria, you've been trying for 12 months under the age of 35, or 6 months if you're over the age of 35, and your GP can refer you to the public fertility.
Yeah. Okay. And then so you've experienced a pregnancy loss. What are your next steps after that? Do you take some time to process that, or you're moving into more of the medical side?
So, yeah, we just wanted to continue it's been a long journey, so we just want to get straight back into it. So I go back to the Royal Women's and they've said that before we can start any fertility treatment, we need to do a tubal patency test. So we got that done and my tubes were clear. There were no issues. And so we were able to proceed with our ovulation induction cycles. So we did letrozole, 5 milligrams, and we did that for 4 cycles. And unfortunately, they were unsuccessful. But on the fourth round of letrozole, I had another chemical pregnancy.
Okay. Were you monitored well with those letrozole cycles? Are they doing blood tests and scans for you and a trigger shot?
So the first 2 cycles, it was just monitoring, no trigger shot. And then the third and fourth cycle, we used a trigger shot.
Okay. Did you get any advice from there why there might be a reason that you were having the chemical pregnancies?
No, not at all. So while in this process, because the public system is so slow, I actually did seek out a private fertility specialist. And when I went to her and explained my situation, she suggested we do some more blood work. And we also did the Caro type blood test. And again, everything's come back normal. So it was a bit of an unknown of why we were having these failures. And she kind of said it was just bad luck. And in the back of my mind, I was like, it sounds unusual to have this much bad luck. It's been three in a row, essentially. But you listen to these professionals and you just keep going. So that's what we did. So at the time when I saw her, we actually did sign a consent form for IVF with the private specialist. And then not long after, the public came through with the consent form. So we were able to pick whether we wanted to go private or go with the public system. And after speaking to the private specialist, she was like, I feel like you're an easy case, go with the public. And I was like, okay, she's telling me to go with the public system. Let's give it a go. So, yeah.
How are you feeling at this point? Because it's been over 2 years now that you've been trying to conceive. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you feeling mentally at this point?
Oh, I am mentally fried. My brain every day is just thinking about fertility, and I just can't wait for the time where I don't have to think about this anymore. 24/7 before bed, first thing I do when I wake up is just read about what else I could be doing to improve my chances.
Yeah. It's also consuming, isn't it? How's your relationship at this point as well?
Yeah, it's been, I must admit, it has definitely put a strain on a relationship. And like I said, it's been so long, it just really takes a toll after this long.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we're both like, we just don't know what we're doing wrong or how to proceed. And it was just having those tough conversations. Do we just keep going? Do we stop? Like, what do we do? Do we look at other options? So, yeah, some tough conversations to be had.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so did you want to talk me through what happened next? So you guys decided you were going to go ahead with IVF. What did that look like for you?
I'm someone who's terrified of needles, so IVF was the last thing I wanted to do. But thankfully, my partner, he did all my injections for me, so I'm so grateful for that. Egg retrieval went really well. I was on a very low dose of gonal F because of my PCOS. We ended up retrieving 18 eggs, 12 fertilized, and we ended up with 9 embryos. That was a really good result. So at the public system, they don't offer PGTA testing, they're untested. And then during the follicle scans, they did pick up a polyp and they were like, you're going to have a hysteroscopy before we can proceed with a transfer. At first, I was like, oh, it's just another delay. And through the public system, it was going to be about a 3-month wait before I could get this hysteroscopy. So, with that in mind, I was like, I'm just going to go and see the private specialist again and see whether she could do my hysteroscopy. And thankfully, I could get that done within a month.
Okay. And what did that look like? So that's going in for surgery?
Correct. Yes. So that is the surgery. So that's when they insert a camera in the uterus, they have a look, and then they were going to remove the polyp. So when they were doing the monitoring scan, the follicle scans, they could see a polyp in my uterus, and they were like, after egg retrieval, you're going to need a hysteroscopy. So I'm really glad I actually went private for this because when I was talking to my specialist, I wanted to know if I could do a laparoscopy as well because very thankful for TikTok because a lot of women on there were like, do a laparoscopy. And I was like, oh, I don't have any symptoms for endometriosis. But after the 3 losses, I was like, it probably would be a good idea. My specialist even said to me, we'll probably find nothing because you don't have any symptoms. But in the end, I was like, for peace of mind, let's just do the laparoscopy. I know it's a bigger surgery, but I was like, if I'm going under for the hysteroscopy, let's just do it. And thankfully we did it because it turns out I had stage 3 endometriosis with no symptoms besides infertility.
Wow. Okay, so would they call that silent endometriosis?
Correct. Yeah. Completely silent. My specialist was shocked.
So no symptoms whatsoever. And I should have asked you in the beginning, other than irregular periods, did you have any other symptoms for PCOS before that diagnosis or when you had that diagnosis? No.
Absolutely none. It was hard because I was on the pill for such a long time, so it would have masked any symptoms. But when I came off it, besides irregular periods, I didn't have any other symptoms.
Yeah. Okay. So then they've removed the endometriosis.
Yeah, so it was excised, and I was like, oh my God, this was the missing piece of the puzzle. I've heard so many women have endo removed and they were able to fall pregnant. So I was like, this is it. This was the reason why I was having these miscarriages. And that's it. We're going to conceive now. And both my partner and I were like, yeah, this is it. And then unfortunately, a couple weeks later, the results from the biopsy of the removal of the polyp came through. And it was really strange because I had an appointment booked in with my specialist, but she ended up calling me a week earlier. And I was like, oh, that's weird that she's calling me. And then when I picked up the phone, she was like, are you alone? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh, like you're not driving, you're not on public transport. And I was like, no, I'm just in my car. And she was like, okay. And then she gave me the news and said, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to proceed with your transfer because you've got complex endometrial hyperplasia with focal atypia.
Would you mind explaining what that is?
Yeah. So at the time, I was just had no idea what any of that meant. And she explained to me that it's precancerous. And I think I just blanked out for the rest of the conversation and I didn't absorb anything from that. And then I drove home in tears. And then when I got home, I was able to like Google that diagnosis and look into what it was. Yeah. Oh, it was my world was just crumbling when I found that out because I was like, oh my God, I might potentially have cancer. So a lot happened. She was like, you need to get an MRI ASAP, more blood work and x-rays done. And she was like, you got to go back into the public system because I said, oh, can I do this all privately? And she's like, no, no, go through the public system. And I was like, okay, because I just wanted to get this done quickly. And I know how slowly the public system moves, but when they think it's cancer, they actually move pretty quickly. And I was able to get an MRI within a week and a half, get everything done really quickly. And yes, luckily the results came back and there was no cancer, but I still have to treat this condition, this precancerous condition.
Yep. And how are you feeling at this point finding out that information? Like, that is huge news. I've gone through so much, and then to have to deal with this would have been, yeah, so hard.
I still get emotional about it because it was just such a huge shock because you never think, oh, at the age of 36, you might have cancer. And then just knowing the delays because initially I was told it could be a 6 to 12 month delay. So we have to completely pause trying to conceive. But I was like, oh my gosh, 6 to 12 months, that's a really long time. And I was told that women who have this diagnosis actually end up with a hysterectomy.
Oh, wow.
So knowing that as well, I was like, well, I want to have a baby. So having a hysterectomy is not an option right now. But thankfully, because it wasn't cancer, they were like, we'll do the fertility sparing treatment, which is the Mirena IUD.
Okay. And could it have turned into cancer if it wasn't picked up when it was picked up? Wow.
Correct. Yes. So I do look at the silver lining because if it wasn't for trying to conceive, it could have turned into cancer and I wouldn't have known about it.
Yeah. And could that have been the reason why you did have chemical pregnancies, or is that still sort of a question mark around that?
There was no clear answer to why, but I think thinking of the stage 3 endo along with the diagnosis with the precancerous cells, I reckon the combination could have potentially been the reason why.
Yeah. Okay. And then so what did the treatment look like for the 6 to 12 months that you needed to put your fertility on pause for?
Yes, so the specialist said that I need to have at least two negative biopsy results before we can proceed with the transfer. So I had the Marina IUD inserted about a month later, and at the time of insertion, they also did another biopsy while I went under to get the Marina inserted. Thankfully, that biopsy came back clear. So I was like, great, that's perfect. Can I use this as my first negative biopsy result? And thankfully, the specialist was like, we can. So I was like, that's really good because I had thought that it was the first biopsy from treatment, but from the time of treatment, they did the biopsy and it was negative. So I was like, that's a great result. And then I had to have another hysteroscopy 3 months later with a biopsy done, and that biopsy came back negative as well. So that was a huge sigh of relief. And after having another appointment with the specialist, we were able to confirm that they were happy with the two negative results and we can proceed with a transfer.
Okay. And do you need to now, moving forward, have regular checkups for that and regular biopsies?
Correct. Yes. So every 6 months, I will need a hysteroscopy to check that the cancerous cells haven't come back.
So how far down the track are we now from when you first started your conception journey?
So we're now like hit over 2 years.
Over 2 years. Yep, you're over 2 years down the track. Okay, so now's the time that you can prepare your body for a frozen embryo transfer. So this is through the public system.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
What did your protocol look like for that? Did you need to take any medication leading up, or were they going to do a natural cycle?
So I did a modified natural cycle with letrozole.
And letrozole worked quite well for you with those in terms of ovulating. It helped you ovulate.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I responded very well to it. So no issues. They were very confident with the modified natural.
Yeah. Okay. So did you want to talk me through that transfer?
So for the first transfer cycle, it was quite messy because I had just had the Marina removed. We weren't quite sure where in my cycle I was. So I went in for my first baseline scan and there was a 15 millimeter structure. They weren't sure whether it was a follicle or whether it was a cyst. So I did a blood test and they were like confirming it was a follicle. I was like, okay, great. So I kind of had missed the mark for taking letrozole. So this was a completely natural cycle. So I was going back in for a scan every second day with blood test and things were progressing, but they also weren't progressing. So the structure was growing, but my blood work was staying flat. And then I think it was by the fourth scan or third scan, we realized that structure was actually a cyst and not a follicle. And I thought my cycle was cancelled. And yeah, it was just such a messy. I think I had 6 blood tests within the space of 9 days. But I felt like the first cycle, it just had a bit of bad juju all over it. In the end, we did end up proceeding with the trigger shot. I did have a follicle that was 14 millimeters, and they were like, that's mature enough. Your lining is okay. So let's proceed. And unfortunately, that cycle failed. I think a part of me was like, it was going to fail from the very beginning based on how messy it was.
Okay. How long was that stretched out in the lead up to actually having your transfer because you had to have all these scans and
I think it was about 2 weeks of monitoring.
yeah. And that mentally in itself would have been tough because when you go in and you have uncertainty with the scans and everything, that all just weighs so heavily on you as well. Like the stress of, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen?
Exactly. Yeah. It was just, I was so uncertain the whole entire time. Like every time I'd go in for a scan, there was no answers. So it was just the whole time I was like, is it happening? Is it not happening? Do we just scrap this cycle completely and just start fresh the next cycle? So it was a bit all over the place.
Yeah. Okay. And did you wait the 2 weeks to get a phone call from the hospital to see whether it was successful or not, or did you test at home?
I tested at home. I think we all struggled not to test. I ended up testing 7 days past 5-day embryo transfer, and yeah, unfortunately, it was negative. So I knew from that test that it wasn't successful.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear. How did you process that information after everything you'd been through? And I guess what was your kind of thoughts around moving into IVF? Did you expect that it was going to fail? Obviously, you said that in the lead up, because it was messy, you thought that. But prior to that, were you quite confident moving into IVF, or how did you feel?
Yeah, so after having the endo removed and the complex hyperplasia being treated, I was like, I've got a fresh uterus. Like, there's nothing stopping a pregnancy from happening. So I was somewhat quietly hopeful that it was going to work. But when it didn't work, I was like, of course it didn't work. It was a messy cycle. I should have known it wasn't going to work. I think at the back of my mind, I was like, it's okay. It's the first one. The first one never works as well. It's always like a trial. So I was kind of giving myself, yeah, a bit of grace.
For sure. And once you had that result, was the next steps to move straight into another transfer, or were you having a break? What kind of advice did you have from there?
Yeah, we went straight into another transfer. We've waited so long to get to this stage. So from egg retrieval to the first transfer, there was a 7-month break. So we were just ready to get into these transfers. So we didn't take a break. We just waited for my period to arrive and then went straight into it.
Yeah. Okay. And did you want to talk me through what this one looked like?
Yeah, so this one was a lot more straightforward. I was able to take letrozole and I went in for one scan and I had one dominant follicle and I was actually already surging. So there's no trigger shot required. I ovulated naturally. I was like, great, everything is working as it should. So I was quite hopeful for this one. I also did acupuncture for this cycle as well. And I was quite confident about this cycle.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk me through what happened next?
So I said I wasn't going to test. I tested on day 5, which is even earlier. So I was totally expecting a negative and it did come back negative, and said I wasn't going to test again. But then I decided to test on day 8. And at first that test looked negative. And then I went back to it a couple minutes later and there was like the faintest line. And I was like, oh, maybe this is a pregnancy. Because it was so light, I was just guarding my heart and I was like, if it is a true positive, it's probably going to be a chemical. But still seeing the faintest line, I was like, my heart was racing.
Yeah. Okay.
And then 2 days later was beta, so I didn't test again in the morning. I was considering whether I should test or not test. I was like, no, I'm not going to test. And yeah, unfortunately, that beta came back less than 2. So there was no implantation. So that faintest line that I saw was likely just an indent or evap line.
Okay. How did you process that?
This one hit me a lot harder than the first one because everything went really smoothly. There was no hiccups. I was like, it should work. Or I didn't understand why it didn't work because the first one didn't work because I was like, that was a trial. It didn't work. But the second one, there was no reason why it shouldn't have worked. So it hit me really hard, this one.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, did you go back to your specialist at this point? Did you ask for any kind of information as to why this might be happening for you?
Yeah, so I saw a specialist at the women's and he said to me it's most likely bad luck. Because they're untested embryos, it just could be a chromosomal abnormality and that's why they weren't successful. In that consult, I was trying to push for a different protocol because I know I had stage 3 endo. I was like, maybe we're not doing enough to suppress it. Even though I had the excision surgery 7, 8 months ago, I just felt like we needed something else as well.
Yep.
And he said to me, because they're the public system, they don't do any add-ons. And if I wanted the extra medication, then I would need to go see a private specialist to get that medication. But I could still do my transfer at the women's. So I was like, okay, thanks for that information. And then straight away, I booked in with a private specialist to see if I could get the medications I wanted. She was able to squeeze me in really quickly, which was really good. And she kind of said the same thing to me. She was like, after 2 failed transfers with untested embryos, that's still kind of within the norm. But I just don't know. I just feel like there's something going on. And I was like, no, I really, really want the extra medication. So I was pushing to get prednisolone and Clexane, which I've read a lot into. A lot of women with endo and adenomyosis have been using this protocol. So I wanted to give it a shot as well. I had to push really, really hard and really advocate for this. She was, in the beginning, she was like, no, I don't want to put you on anything. Just try again with your current protocol. But I kept pushing and pushing. And she was like, okay, we can try the prednisolone. And I was like, okay, great, Alice, I've got something extra for this cycle.
Yep. And do you know what extra support those drugs provide for someone with endometriosis?
Yeah, so I've read into it a lot. So for the prednisolone, it suppresses any inflammation essentially. And that's what my fear is that even though the surgery was 8 months ago, there might be some inflammation coming back. I know it's still early, but I'm just worried that there were some inflammation. And I think the prednisolone will help suppress the inflammation.
Yeah. And then do you take that in the lead up to your transfer or after the transfer?
In the lead up, so I started taking mine from cycle day 1.
Okay. Yep. So this is transfer number 3. And are you doing a natural cycle, letrozole?
Yes, so again, doing a modified natural with letrozole. I went in on my scan on cycle day 9 and I was already surging, so no trigger. I was hoping to get the trigger shot because from comments from my TikTok, some women were like, just push for the trigger shot because it can help. But unfortunately, I was already surging, so they were like, there's no use for it.
Okay. All right. So what does this transfer look like then?
So we go in for transfer on Wednesday, which is in 5 days away. Feeling very, very anxious for this one because if this one fails, I just don't know what to do next.
Yeah, for sure. And how many embryos do you have left now? 6 after this one or
If this one doesn't work out, we will have 6 embryos. And yeah, we're just in discussion on what to do next. So my private specialist has recommended that we move the embryos over and get them PGTA tested, or we do another round of IVF to get to new embryos and have them tested. Because with testing embryos that are already frozen comes with risk. We might lose a couple of embryos in the process. And I've also read that having embryos thawed twice have lower implantation rates as well.
okay, that's interesting. All right. Well, I'm so hopeful for you. Have you learnt on any tools throughout this time to help you? Obviously, like right now, you're feeling very anxious in the lead up to your transfer and you've been through a lot. Is there anything that you've leaned on for support throughout this time?
To be completely honest, TikTok. The community on TikTok has been so helpful and just lovely. I get so many messages from other women who are going through the same thing. And to talk to other women who are going through the same thing is so helpful to me.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll definitely put your TikTok in the show notes for anyone who might want to follow your journey or reach out to you and have a chat. They might be going through something similar. Obviously, you produced quite a lot of eggs. How did your body recover from that? Was it obviously you had a lot going on the side as well as that, but was that quite a straightforward process for you in terms of going with recovery?
Yeah, surprisingly, it was. I didn't have too much discomfort afterwards. I was monitored for OHSS because of my PCOS. But yeah, all my symptoms were pretty mild. I just kept up to date with my medication and yeah, I recovered pretty quickly after the egg retrieval.
I'm sure you're at an age that there's probably been some pregnancy announcements along the way for you. How have you navigated that?
Yeah, I would say it's been really hard navigating this. All my friends essentially have kids, and we are the only ones who don't have a baby. It's really hard seeing all your friends living the life that you want. But they've been great. My friends have been super, super supportive. They always think of me, but it is hard when they haven't gone through what you've gone through. So even though they've been super supportive, they don't quite understand exactly what you're actually going through.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things you like don't know unless you've been through it yourself, even just the amount that's involved with every cycle, the appointments, the scans, like it's just consumes your entire life. So
Yeah,
I think it's
exactly.
a great thing to be able to reach out to people that are in the same situation as you. Like it's always great, I think, along the way to have those, I guess you could call it an IVF friends or fertility friends that just completely understand the way you're feeling and what you're going.
Exactly. And just the lingo as well, because there's so many terminology with IVF. And when I'm talking to my friends, I have to explain everything in detail. Whereas when I'm talking to someone who understands the lingo, we just have a normal conversation.
Is there anything that you wish was spoken about more in terms of fertility?
I just wish it wasn't made out to be as easy as people think it is. Because I went into it thinking I was going to fall pregnant really quickly, and that wasn't the case. I think a lot of us growing up, we were always told how to prevent pregnancy, but never actually learnt how to get pregnant. I literally learnt ovulation tracking only when I started trying to conceive. Like, I never knew any of that prior to this.
Along the way, have you been advised to take any supplements or make any lifestyle changes? Or is it more been just from a medication perspective, like Western medicine?
I've taken a lot of supplements from the very beginning. So I started off with, the basic of Elevate prenatal as everyone starts when they first start trying to conceive. I quickly ended up switching to Naturo Best after a lot of comments from TikTok. I also take vitamin D, omega, omega 3. I also took ubiquinol prior to my egg retrieval, vitamin E to help with the lining, and NAC, which also helps with inflammation. So a whole raft of different supplements. Before my egg retrieval, I was taking so many supplements. And I think now that I'm in transfer stage, I'm taking a different raft of supplements.
Yeah, sure. And was this from a naturopath or you just did your own research and what you should be taking?
It's just from my own research and from others on TikTok advising as well.
Would you have any advice for someone that might potentially think that they've got some sort of infertility issue or that they're struggling to get pregnant?
I would say push for testing. Just don't wait. I know they say wait 6 months or 12 months before you do the testing, but I don't see any value in waiting so long. Just get the testing done ASAP. I wish I got my testing done much earlier.
Yep. Okay. And then for someone who might be starting their IVF journey,
The needles is actually the easiest part. As someone who's terrified of needles, that honestly was the easiest part of the IVF journey. It is the waiting is the hardest part.
is there anything else that you wanted to talk about today? You've given us so much amazing information in regards to fertility and just, yeah, self-advocation. But is there anything else you wanted to share with us?
Not particularly, but I would probably say like, yeah, the major advice is just advocate for yourself because I feel like specialists don't always know what's best for you, but you do. So go into your appointments knowing what you want and just advocate for what you're after.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. You're incredible. You've been through so much, and I'm just going to be rooting for you and so hopeful that this round is your round.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for sharing today. It's so important, and I know this will be so helpful for someone who might be on a similar journey at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Good luck.
Thank you.
This has been The Space Between Two Lines. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and register on our website to share your story. The link is in the bio. Until next time.